what this is Jesus is asking us to take off the mask of self-righteousness. Take off the mask of self-righteousness. It's not the real you. Take it off. This is what it's like to live in the kingdom of heaven. How do you take it off? View others as you view yourself, worthy of forgiveness, worthy of grace, worthy of kindness. Now, he brings us back a little bit here, where it's like if this was, you ever go bowling and you have bumper guards? Like this is a bumper guard on this gutter, and here's a bumper guard in this other gutter, where he says, don't give dogs what is sacred, and don't throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. I believe this is saying there's no condemnation, but there is discernment. Not everybody is in a place to be trustworthy with everything. And certain relationships, it doesn't make sense to share certain things. Certain relationships you have can't bear the weight of your sin or your confession or your shame or your struggles or your anxiety. Certain people can't handle that. You don't go to your 5-year-old and tell them how you're freaking out because you don't know how you're going to pay the rent. Like that's a burden they can't carry. There are people that are struggling with their own stuff and they're looking for someone to blame. And if you are in a role in their life where you share your struggles, they may blame you for their struggles, right? So there's a discernment here that says, do not judge or condemn, but discern. And we'll talk a little later about another angle of discernment that he calls when he talks about false teachers. So it's not like we check our brain at the door and don't judge. It's we don't condemn others, because when we view them as God's children, they are worthy of forgiveness. Condemnation isn't in our heart if we take off that mask of self-righteousness. The next mask we get into is the mask of self-sufficiency. Now this is verse 7. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So, in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. So the golden rule there, do unto others as you have them do, is tied to ask, seek, and knock. It's all one teaching. Interesting, huh? This idea of self-sufficiency, like we don't need help, is a lie. It's a mask that we put on. It's a mask that we put on that separates us from God and from others. And the overall narrative of Scripture is calling us to live in authentic intimacy with God and authentic intimacy with each other. And these masks separate us. So if we don't view God as someone who's on our side, who's with us and for us, we don't go to him to ask, seek, and knock. We try to figure it out on our own. And when you start to figure things out on your own and you rely on your own self, you're separating yourself from your provider, from your caregiver, from the one who is the source of all good things. And so he's asking us to tear down this mask of self-sufficiency, go to the Lord, and you can trust in him because you know this. What kind of good parent doesn't give their child what they ask? So he makes it relatable to us as parents. Like we know. And that's the way God views us. He's inviting us to this closeness with God where we view him as a parent that cares for us. So to do that, we have to take down the mask of self-sufficiency. That means to humble ourselves and admit that we need help. Ask, seek, and knock. So let's take off that mask. Verse 12 is the mask of self-centeredness. So in everything, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Take down that mask of that mask that wants to make everything about you. Elevate others. Serve others. Your role in this life isn't to care for yourself. It's to care for others. That's what we're called to do. So if we take off the mask of self-centeredness, it draws us closer to God and we live more in his kingdom. Verses 13 and 14 talk about the mask of self-sufficiency. security. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it, but small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few will find it. The narrow and the wide gate is the easy path. It's the one that everybody takes. It's the way the current of the world wants to take you through the broad gate. The broad gate has you not wrestling with things like I wrestled with in high school. There are people that went to parties, got drunk Sunday morning, didn't go to church, didn't care. They weren't wrestling. They were just going with the flow of society. There was no conviction in them. There was no change. There are people that live like that, where their priority is the world's priority. And by all measures that they were going around, they're doing fine. But the hard gate, the narrow gate, is to swim upstream, go against what culture wants you to do. And we follow the kingdom of heaven versus the kingdom of the world. And that has us doing stuff like self-control, forgiving people, being gracious, being sacrificial, prioritizing the things of God over the things of the world. And when we as a community do that, this is what the church is. It's when God's people come together to prioritize God's kingdom over the kingdom of the world in our lives personally, in our relationships with each other, and in the world around us. That's what it means to live in God's kingdom as his church. And we get into a dangerous place when we start using the world's metrics to determine whether or not we're successful, instead of using the kingdom metrics. And that leads to the next one, talking about false prophets, verse 15. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. I like how it says watch out for false prophets, because you might go, yeah, those false teachers, but why do you have to watch out for them? Because you are prone to the broad road. We are prone to the broad road. We are prone to using the kingdom of the world to help justify our life. So how a false prophet would be like, as a church community, our priority is never financial success. That's not our metric. But oftentimes in the broad road, the kingdom of the world, we look at a ministry or a church or a nonprofit, and it's out there doing good. And if it has lots of money and lots of followers, we just assume that must be a good ministry. Or I'm going to follow that because I see the success of the world all over that. And that is where the false prophets can grab you. So there's a call here. Let's not just say, yeah, those false prophets over there. Let's look inside of ourselves and say we have to be careful not to be tricked by these wolves in sheep's clothing. Because we are prone to buy into the metrics of the world, the kingdom of the world. And then he says, here's how you do that. By their fruit, you'll recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down, thrown into the fire. Thus, by the fruit, you will recognize them. Now, before you read this and go, ooh, it's talking about salvation. No, he's not. He's talking about fruit. And he's talking about trees. Okay? It's a metaphor of fruits and trees. And what I love about the tree metaphor is if you think about it, if you think of an apple tree and what's in its DNA to do, what does it strive for? Where does the energy go for an apple tree? And I'll give you a hint. It's not to produce apples. The apple tree, the energy from an apple tree goes to root down deep in the rich soil, to get its nutrients down in the dirt, in the muck, to do the hard work of going into the dirt to get the nutrients from the soil that it needs. And then it also reaches for the sun to get the energy that it needs. And when a tree is fruitfully rooted in healthy soil and reaching for the sun, do you know what happens? Apples. 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 The fruit is a byproduct of the rooting and the reaching. And that's what Jesus is inviting us to do. Let's focus on being faithful. Like we as a church, I don't know what we're going to look like in 10 years, but I do know that we're going to be obsessed about being faithful every day. We may reach 1,000 people, but what we're focusing in is one more. Let's reach one more person for Jesus. This is what Jesus is inviting, this integrity, he's inviting us to drop the masks and just be real. Let's be authentic. Let's stop pretending that we don't need him. Let's stop pretending that we are someone that we're not. And it's this beautiful, beautiful invitation. Verse 21 is, we see the mask of false piety. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Now, let's be careful. This is not a proof text for who's saved and who's not saved. Jesus is talking about this whole time. What does it look like to live in the kingdom of heaven today? What is the fruit of living in this economy, this value of heaven? What's introduced here is this kind of mysterious but awesome concept of the kingdom of heaven. There's an element of, there's the now, where we live in it now, where when we live in the fruit of being not judgmental, there's a joy that comes with that, right? There's a purpose, there's a peace, when we don't have anxiety and we trust in the Lord, there's fruit that comes from that. That's called living in the kingdom of heaven. So there's the now, and then there's the not yet. And what binds those together is this reality that we are all growing. I started out as a conflicted teenager. And as that spirit inside of me that helped me overcome the party life and helped me overcome the insecurity and the fear and the desire to be accepted by the wrong crowd and all of that stuff, when the desire to overcome that got stronger and stronger, and I got stronger and stronger and more, I became more who God created me to be. The older I got, the more I live my life, I'm growing. That's called sanctification. The not yet is, I won't achieve the fullness of that until Jesus returns and there's a new heaven and a new earth. So Jesus, he's not talking about how to get into heaven. He's talking about, here's what it looks like to live in the kingdom of heaven. The now, and our hope lies in the not yet. And the beauty of it is the more we grow in the now, the more confidence we get in the not yet, because we see the fruit. We see the fruit of living this out. And that's how you identify the false teachers. It's looking at the fruit, and be aware. You're prone to that. So not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Many will say to me on that day, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. And then he talks about what it looks like. He closes it out with this metaphor of those who do what I say are like the builder who builds their house on a rock. Those who don't are like the foolish builder who builds their house in the sand. And so when the winds and rains come, it's washed away. Now, in storytelling, in archetypal storytelling, wind, rain, storms always represents chaos. So when chaos comes, if you are living out the Sermon on the Mount, you're living out the kingdom of heaven, you're refusing to judge, you're putting down all these masks, and you're living with authenticity, with who you really are with God, you will find that when the chaos comes, you're going to be fine. But if you are living this double life, or you are rooting yourself in the kingdom of the world, and chaos happens to the kingdom of the world, you will crumble. And that's very true. That's as pragmatic as the judgment concept. So we put down the mask of false security. That was the last mask.